Hi, my name is Susan Lechelt, and today I'll be sharing our work on EvalMe, which is a system with a tangible interface designed to help students and instructors evaluate and reflect on learning experiences together. So this work was carried out together with my co-authors Frederik, Brudy, Nicolai, Marquardt, and Yvonne at University College London and the University of Edinburgh. So asking students to reflect on their learning experience and their understanding of pedagogical content is a really important part of the learning process. But methods of eliciting reflection that are most widely adopted, like surveys and post-tests, can miss important aspects of the learning experience. And this is because students can forget how they felt or what they learned at specific points in time. At the same time, with these methods, students are not often given the opportunity to discuss together with their peers how their experience and understanding changed throughout a learning session. So the key questions we sought to answer in this research were, might there be alternative approaches that are both lightweight and enjoyable to use, and which can support more in-depth individual reflection and shared reflection amongst students? And if so, what are the practical and pragmatic considerations of using them in real learning environments? So to address these questions, we chose to adopt a research through design approach, which had 4 stages. First, we conceptualized an evaluation system with a tangible interface within our team of academics. Second, we co-designed the system with 2 different groups of expert educational workshop leaders. Third, we co-developed EvalMe. And fourth, we used it in 3 educational workshop settings for 12 to 14-year-old students. And these workshops were run by our co-design partners, with EvalMe used as their evaluation method. So we described the first 2 stages of our process at length in the paper, and these led to a number of important findings about practical and pragmatic considerations of using an in situ evaluation tool in learning environments. So, for example, insights into what types of questions to ask students and how often, as well as how to introduce a novel evaluation tool while keeping the students and instructors' focus on the learning content. And I would encourage you to look at the paper for those insights, but for the rest of the talk, I'll focus on our development of EvalMe and our findings from the workshops. So at its core, EvalMe comprises a tangible interface, which we call the EvalMe Sender, and a desktop application. The EvalMe Sender is passed around the classroom at different points during a learning session, and students use it to input their answers to 3 different questions, which are decided on by a teacher. Students input their responses to the questions through turning a rotary encoder and lighting up corresponding LED lights on an LED ring. The design allows for asking for responses to questions or statements that ask for a level of agreement. For example, I'm having fun, as well as multiple choice questions. The sender can work with or without requiring students to authenticate their identity through personal RFID tags. And once satisfied, the students submit their answer and then pass the sender on to the next student. And when they do so, their submitted data is immediately wirelessly transmitted to the desktop application. The form factor of the EvalMe Sender was designed so that students could hide their responses from others, or also to make them visible to those around them. And the aim of this was to encourage them to congregate around the tangible interface and discuss their answers to the questions together when submitting responses. So on the desktop app, instructors manage the question sets, and this is also where the children's aggregate responses to the questions over time are visualized. For example, looking at the yellow bar charts in the image here, we see how the students' responses to the statement, I have the strong understanding of this topic, changed each time the device was passed around throughout the learning session. The application is designed to enable these visualizations to also be displayed back to the students on a large screen in order to also facilitate group discussion at the end of the learning session. So we used EvalMe in 3 educational workshops, which were all between 2 and 5 hours long, and all included 12 to 14-year-old students. All workshops were led by our co-design partners, and the co-design partners led both the learning content and developed the questions to be used with the EvalMe related, and the questions that they developed related to learning outcomes, the students' level of engagement, and the students' perceptions of the learning content. So just to highlight a few key findings, we found that the students spent a lot of time reflecting on their responses to the questions and hesitating before submitting their responses. And our observations of how the students interacted with the EvalMe Sender really compellingly showed how its physical form factor transformed the task of entering data input into one that was more embodied and evocative than, for example, answering questions on paper might be. We also found that when EvalMe was passed around, its physical presence provided a place around which the students could congregate, and this in turn prompted the students to talk about what responses they had selected and why. So this kind of physical presence made the process of evaluation a shared, connected activity that the students could choose to complete together. So in terms of the data that was collected, the data was perceived to be really valuable by the instructors, especially for informing their pedagogical practice. But getting the children to reflect on their aggregate responses, as visualized through the bar charts that we created, was quite tricky. And based on our work, more work is required to understand how to scaffold students' interpretations of how their aggregate learning and experiences evolve over time. So, in sum, our paper explores the value and pragmatic considerations of using new technologies for supporting gathering and discussing reflective data in real learning environments, and we hope you give it a read for more information. Thanks for listening.